Hello everyone, it is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. And I'm I have my checklist now of things to do, but I realize the checklist is only as good as the person putting it together, so I still get to figure out if I've done everything correctly. But I've done everything I think I need to do. So anyhow, this is MuseScore Cafe, and this is the third week of the month. It is July 20th, according to my watch here, and that means it's time for our score of the month. And since we've just started our music engraving workshop, and we're working on a Schumann piece for that, I figured I would do my crack at that and talk about a little bit about what my process would be for entering it, and then those of you who have been working on it can maybe feel free to ask questions based on your own experience having entered the same score. So if you're not if you're kind of new here and not sure what I'm talking about with this whole music engraving workshop business, then make sure you're on my newsletter. Well, no, you're getting my newsletter, you know about that. So just this is something we're going to be using the MuseScore Cafe to kind of feature some of the work that we're doing as part of the workshop, but it's still just a standalone thing that you can just get a lot out of whether you're participating in the workshop or not. So I'm going to get underway here by talking about the piece that we're going to enter and a little bit about where it's coming from. So first thing I want to show you is the piece in its original raw form. This is Schumann, Robert Schumann's actual handwriting, as far as we all know. As far as anyone knows, this is Schumann's actual handwriting, the original draft of the Happy Farmer in English, Fröhlicher Landmann would be the German, and I'm doing my best German pronunciation there. It's not bad for an American, I hope. So this is, really, really, really hard to read, but I can make it out. But yeah, I certainly would not want to work from the composer's manuscript here. Instead, we are going to be working from the edition that was prepared by Schumann's wife, Clara. And, this is the wrong page. Let me get to the right page here. So this is the edition that is prepared by Clara based on Robert's original manuscript, and compared to other published editions, she made relatively few changes. She added some dynamics that weren't in the original, right? The original does not, it has a forte at the beginning. I guess he does have some other fortes, these big, huge things. I didn't even recognize what they were. But I think she might have added a couple of additional things. She also chose to unroll the repeats, right? The original version had this really short little repeated section there that Clara's version just said, no, let's just write that out. That's too short to repeat. Absolutely agree with her decision there. And she didn't do a whole lot else in terms of things like adding fingering and so forth. She was really just very true to the original, other than things like unrolling that repeat. So this is the version that we are, trying to work from, is the version that Clara had edited. And this is where I'm going to take as my starting point. And so I'm going to go through my process and we'll see what happens. And, we've had some discussion in the workshop already where people had a lot of questions about why this, why that, how to do this, and etc. And you'll get to see me address some of those same issues again. And also, whatever else that didn't come up. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my score. And this is the first thing that's always worth pointing out, is that in MuseScore, let me go ahead and close the play panel here, you can always start from just this default untitled score here, right? You can start from this and just add staves as necessary, but I never recommend that. So one question is about making the eighth pickup measure. Well, you'll see that. as part of this. So I'm not going to start from this score at all. This is fine for playing around, but I'm going to create a new score. So Control N to create a new score, and I will go ahead and put in the English title since that's what this edition used. And I will go ahead and put Robert Schumann here. And actually, if I were so already I get to ask myself one question here. The composer's name does not appear on this score. Why? Because it was part of a collection. His name was on the front cover. His name was elsewhere, not here on every page. But if I'm producing my own standalone edition, well, I want to have the composer's name show. So I am going ahead and entering that, and that'll probably be all I will enter. I won't enter like the editor's name. That kind of stuff would go somewhere else. And I'm copyright status. I don't know. The piece itself is public domain. I don't plan to copyright my particular edition here, so I'm just going to leave all that blank. Move on. Now, I can either pick the Grandstaff template, or I can come under here under solo and pick piano. They do the same thing. I do not think there are any differences. In theory, there might be some style setting that's set up for piano scores that's not set up for generic Grandstaff, but what else is a generic Grandstaff used except for piano? So I typically just use the Grandstaff. So I'm going to set that up. In the next screen, I'm going to go ahead and pick the key signature here. Why not? It's F. I know that. Whoops. F. So I pick my F key signature, and I'm now going to enter the time signature of 4/4. And now I guess I do need to look and make sure that her edition used 4/4, because it doesn't, right? It uses the C for common time. And my own inclination as an editor today is not to use the C to write the 4/4. This is maybe my own bias as a jazz musician. I prefer seeing 4 versus the C for common time. So here's where you get to make a decision. Are we merely engraving Clara's edition, or are we creating our own edition? It doesn't matter a whole lot. I guess I'll just go with the C. But if I was doing this for my own purposes, I'd use 4/4 to be honest. So now pickup. Here's where I select it. I select pickup measure, and I select the length I want. We want 1/8, so 1/8. There we go. You can create that after the fact if you want also, and I'll show you how to do that. But 1/8, and I don't know how many measures it'll be, and I'm seeing my screen flicker, which is a bad sign here. It tells me that my audio is probably doing weird things too, and it's just going to be one of those. I'm going to move on. So here's the score basically set up. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do now is I'm getting tired of flicking back and forth between the scores. So what I'm going to do, 20 measures, thank you. Is there literally no sound now? Because I still have, I still have sound. So if it stopped for you, refresh your screen. There was a momentary glitch that I saw, but it shouldn't have been anything more than momentary. It's not going to be as many measures as this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of resize things a bit here so that I can see some MuseScore and some PDF at the same time. And I'm going to do this kind of by splitting the screen vertically like this. And I'm not doing the fancy MuseScore split screen thing where you can, under the view menu here, you can say, where is the thing? I guess I would have to move the window down more so you could see the item. But under the view menu, there's this documents stack that would allow you to have 2 MuseScore files there. I'm not doing that. I'm just kind of arranging my windows on the screen. But I'm also going to do a thing where I instead of having all of this toolbar taking up all this room, I'm going to switch to my editing workspace, which reduces the size of that, gets rid of one of the toolbars. And so in previous episodes, I've showed how to do that. So what I want to do now is I want to enter in some line breaks. And as I recall in the original, and I'll go ahead and flip over to it, she's gone ahead and made 4 measures per line consistently. And yeah, on music of this level of simplicity, that's a pretty common thing to do. 4 measures per line is very common in lead sheets. It's very common in music for children. It's very common in music that has a certain simplicity to it, where it's going to be short enough where you don't need to pack things in. You just want to reflect the phrase structure of the piece, and it is 4 measures per line, except for, of course, that pickup. So, first thing I'm going to do is enter that. I'm going to select from here to the end of the score. So click there, Shift Control End. Oh, and when I moved MuseScore there, it messed up the display of my keystrokes. So let's see if this is any better. Now I'm going to go to Format, Add Remove System Breaks, and say break every 4 measures. Bam. So now I've got my breaks every 4 measures. Now, by the way, I said I was going to tell you if you didn't already enter your pickup, it's not too late. You can right-click your first measure, say Measure Properties, and here is where you can select what you want its length to be. 1/8 is what it selected. If I want to change it to 2/8 or 3/8 or whatever I want, I can do that here. And then you would also want to check this box that says Exclude from Measure Count, so it's not counted in the measure numbering. Now, already, we do get one thing that is a possible difference, now that I think about it, between the generic, let me see if I press a key. Yeah, it does show keystrokes, but in sort of a weird place, but that's okay. Notice the measure numbers are appearing here. The original edition does not have them. Well, that's pretty common in piano music. It's actually common in any solo music, really. Is there any reason to have a pickup greater than the time sequence? Well, it's certainly possible. You could do it. You could enter whatever you want in there, but I can't think of a reason for it, unless maybe you've got a pickup that's kind of a right. It's like a big long cadenza-y arpeggio where you just want to cram 17 notes into a measure, and you want to notate them as sixteenths, and it's really just sort of a gesture, like 17 grace notes almost. So anyhow, yeah, I could imagine that, but it's not normally a thing. So yeah, so the thing is, I was trying to say about measure numbers is piano music typically doesn't have measure numbers. Why? Because, well, the reason for measure numbers is for communication between musicians. So like at a rehearsal, someone can say, hey, take it from measure 37, and everyone can jump to measure 37 because there's numbers on their score. Well, with piano music, that doesn't happen, right? No one, it's just you playing it. So we often don't include measure numbers. Now, realistically, that's kind of a pain in the butt for educational purposes, because sometimes I'll want to talk about what's going on in measure 8 or what's going on in such and such a measure, and now I look at it and I can't see the measure numbers. So I'm going to leave the measure numbers on. But if I wanted to turn them off, let me show you how to do that. And actually, this is just sort of bugging me that it's not full screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip. I can flip as I need to, not freak myself out. There we go. So if I want to get rid of the measure numbers, I would go to Format, Style, Measure Numbers, and uncheck the box. And you can see they just went away. But I'm going to go ahead and leave them in because they'll be useful for me in talking about what's going on. Okay, so now it's time to actually start entering some notes, right? So I'm now going to rely on memory. And here is where those of you who are also taking the musicianship skills workshop, what you're going to see is I'm all about establishing relationships in the brain between things. And so if I'm trying to enter music, I don't want to just be copying dots. I want to be understanding things. And so I'm looking at this melody. Now I want to know what I'm going to enter the first note. Okay. Boo-dum, boo-da-do-da-do, da-do-da-do-da-dum. Okay, I'm gonna enter that much. Boo-bum, boo-bum. I already forgot. Is this an F? Bum. I think it is, but I'm gonna find out in a minute. Boo-da-ba-ba. Whoops. Boo-ba-ba. Bum. 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 All right. So now I had to check on that low F there because boo boo da doo dum ba dum could have been an A, right? But no, it's an F. Do da do dum boo da do dum. So I'll enter that next. Do ba do dum ba da. Whoops ba da do dum. Flipping back. Ba do do dum. Bum 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 bum. So yeah, if I wasn't worried about showing keystrokes and doing things, I'd have my screen set up better. Realistically, I wouldn't try to do this all from one screen. I'd be having a printout to be copying from, or I would be looking at it on another device. But I'm actually finding this somewhat useful to be flipping back and forth because I don't know. I can talk about things like the fact that I'm singing this through, and in the tomorrow's masterclass, I'll talk about things like bang, ba-dum, and how that's nice voice leading. And this is why we practice singing melodies that involve steps because ba-dum. Yes, all the stuff you're seeing here on the screen are what I'm typing. This is how I'm entering the notes. Exactly what you're seeing. I haven't clicked a thing to enter in a long time. I've been typing things. Control Z is undo. Every time I make a mistake, Control Z undoes it. When I type C, it enters a C. If I type N, that's how I go to note input mode. Type N again, goes back out. 4 is the shortcut for eighth notes, right? So I'm totally using keyboard shortcuts for everything. Now you'll notice I did something I almost never do, which is enter the bass clef first. Why do you think I did that? Melody. It's the melody. I think about the melody first. Now I can go in and I will go ahead and hit escape. And now I will click over here, go into note input mode, and see. It's this chord thing it's an F triad with the A on top. It's an eighth rest. And then a rest. I'm typing 0. And then a rest again, and the next one is a rest, and then so here's an interesting thing. Notice that the pattern got interrupted here. Did y'all know? I'm sure you all noticed that as you entered it. Did y'all figure out why the pattern got interrupted? It's a 3-note pattern in the right hand, everywhere except for this one chord. Ooh, R for those chords. Peter, you went, yeah, you absolutely are right. I should totally do that. And thank you for reminding me, because that's going to happen all the time, and I should get in the habit of it. Except I can't here because the chord is different here, right? It's a 3-note triad here, it's a 2-note triad here. Why? Because the F is in the left hand, and he didn't, you can't play the same note in both hands at 2 different times. You could notate it that way and get away with it, but B flat D is what I'm going to enter, and then the rest. And now I'm going to do what Peter's suggesting. I'm going to enter the chord, so a rest, 0, and then the chord, F-A-C, and then R to repeat the chord. Yeah, brilliant shortcut. Maybe by the time I got halfway through the piece, I would have recognized, hey, I'm going to use the R. It's especially useful. I would notice it if I had to enter the same chord like 8 times in a row. Like think about like that Chopin prelude, the E minor prelude, where it's that chord repeating, right, where you're repeating this chord. Y'all probably know that prelude, or many of you do. That chord, you repeat each chord like 4 or 5 times, and then I probably would have noticed that. Oh yeah, I'm gonna hit R for that. Okay, moving on. Uh, there's another odd thing here that this chord, it changes the rhythm, right? So far we've had eighth notes, but here it's bum 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 bum. But this one, bum 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 bum. Oh, I'm singing the wrong pitch. Bum 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 bum. It's a long note, the second note, instead of an eighth note. No, I'm not talking about the raindrop one. All that has a repeated note. But I'm talking about the E minor one, the How Insensitive prelude, the one that's basically the same tune as How Insensitive, the Jobim tune. Not the same, but clearly related. So anyhow, it's an eighth note, but then it's a quarter note. Now you can still use R. I'm going to press 5 to change to quarter note, and then press R. So it'll use the duration you've selected when repeating. And so that's a nice little feature. And now back to eighth rest, and it's the F triad with A on top, and then again repeats as in quarter note. And now we have eighth rest, and then C and G. Just those two notes. The E completes that triad. And I'm pointing these theoretical things out because this is an important part of, first of all, how I have the memory to when I'm looking at it and then transferring my attention to MuseScore. I don't want to just be copying dots. I want to be thinking about what's going on and realize, and it's also going to help me when I go to learn it, to play it, or to memorize it, to realize that this is a full C major triad. It's just got the notes kind of split between the hands. And Michael, yes, the selecting the duration before pressing R is very much the same idea as with ties. You select the duration, then you press the tie button. So Trevor, you do a lot of music entering and a lot of fancy stuff, and yeah, you're going to save yourself a ton of time if you start using shortcuts. All right, so we have the C triad here. The next chord is the G7 chord, omitting the D because it's in the left hand. So it's an F. Whoops, that's not right. It's an eighth rest, and then a F, G, B, and it's B natural. So I'm using up arrow to raise the pitch. And now it's the C triad. Rest, bum, bum, or rest, and then repeat as quarter note. All right, I'm going to save this thing now because I've just done a whole bunch of work, right? Save. And I'm going to go and save it to, I guess I'll put it here under Cafe. Um, 22. So I'm going to put this as my version of Happy Farmer. Perfect. All right. And yes, I am using a laptop with a touchpad. And I'll say a couple words about that because it's actually somewhat relevant. I started off like most people did using well, no, I started off before mice were a thing, right? I was just actually posting about that in the community. I started on a Commodore 64. Mice were not a thing. When mice became a thing, I used a mouse. And I was working for Hewlett Packard doing, programming all day long, and I started to develop some pretty serious tendonitis issues. And I had an ergonomics guy come and rearrange my office to try to rearrange the height of things and stuff. And we were able to get the mouse to be less objectionable. But what I quickly discovered was I like the touchpad a lot better. It's a lot less motion. This right hand motion of moving from over to a mouse pad and back, no matter where it is. Yes, I'm that old, Michael. That arm motion of getting to the mouse did not make my arm happy, and getting rid of all mice from my life and only using touchpads that are like just inches from the keyboard really makes my life happier. It does mean drag and drop is not very convenient, but that's okay. You never need to use drag and drop in MuseScore, almost never. And yeah, you almost never need to use drag and drop. Clicking, yeah, there'll be some things I'll click, but drag and drop almost never. And clicking is very easy with the touchpad, at least on most touchpads. That's one thing I can't get used to on Apple touchpads is that you have to physically press them. You can't just tap them, unless there's a setting for that that I don't know. But most Apple touchpads require me to physically press it, and again, that's a little more effort than I. That's not as good on my wrist, and it just feels like it's a mechanical thing ready to give out. Okay, I have entered now half the piece because right these same four measures are going to get repeated again more or less and then again later, so I'm like largely done with the piece except I haven't finished those four bars, right? So I'm going to finish those four bars by entering their stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and just shrink this screen down here so I can uh, actually see things at the same time a little bit better. um, it's not going to work as soon as I start typing into MuseScore. It's going to cover this screen. But again, not going to worry about it. What I'm missing is the dynamics, the tempo, and the slurs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the dynamic. Well, I'll enter the tempo first. And so, frisch und munter. You would think that maybe I would have looked it up because, yeah, I remember a bit of German. I remember more German grammar than vocabulary. And I don't know either of those words. But I'm going to enter that as if it was a tempo marking. Control Alt T. And I'm just going to select what's there and get rid of it and type frisch und munter. And as far as the playback on that goes, there is no marked metronome tempo here. Now, there is a period. Frisch und munter, period. Now, is that accurately correct? I mean, does it make sense to put a period there? That's not a sentence. I'm not in favor of putting a period there. I might look at Robert's original to see if he actually put a period there, and yeah, he did, but no, I ain't going to do that. Right? I'm going to make an editorial decision right here. I'm not going to put in the period there. Now, someone mentioned about a couple people mentioned about actual tempo markings. It would be nice to have an actual tempo marking. So I'm going to enter one. I'm going to press F2 to get to the special characters. And yes, I know there was one originally there that I deleted, but that's okay. I can add it back. Quarter note equals space equals. What do y'all think is reasonable? Yeah, it's maybe about 100. I'm guessing. Yeah, that's a little slow. I'm just going to go with 120 for now. You could check other people's editions to see what tempo marking they actually put, but I am going to actually put that in the text. I don't mind doing that. This is probably a thing that's more common for modern musicians to want actual tempo markings. They were much less common back in the 19th century, but hey, we're not in the 19th century, so I'm not writing for 19th century musicians. So I've got my tempo marking in there, and I put in the actual tempo that I want. In principle, MuseScore will honor that. Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Okay, now I want to enter the dynamic. Now, a question came up about the dynamics from several people about where they're actually going. And let's look at this. There's a few things worth mentioning. One is, okay, the dynamic for piano music typically goes between the staves, and that's where she has it here, between the staves. And that's where Robert had it in the original. But notice what happens here on the third system. There's this really curious thing, and I guess I need to make this a little bit bigger to see it. There's a curious thing here where the dynamic is repeated, right? Let me get my chat back also. I don't want to lose you folks. So the dynamic is repeated both above the top staff and below the bottom staff. And everyone's wondering, well, why? And what's going on is that's the melody, right? The melody is in both hands. Now that in itself wouldn't tell me that I need to repeat the dynamic like that, but I think what she's going for, what Robert was going for, she's copying his original manuscript, is to the extent that what we're really doing when we put in dynamic markings for piano is we're marking the overall dynamic. Basically, we're marking the dynamic for the melody, and the pianist is supposed to be smart enough to make everything else quieter. Well, here, we want both hands to be playing louder. It's only those inner notes that should be quieter. So somehow writing the dynamics outside the staff is trying to clue a pianist in that yes, the melody is in both hands, so both hands need to be loud, but still not the inner voices. I still think that's overkill. I personally would have been happy with no extra dynamic marking there, just letting the original forte ride. I would have been totally happy with that. So anyhow, so my dynamic marking forte. Now, the one thing to know is that dynamics in MuseScore will appear below the staff by default. So in piano music, the way to get this is to attach it to the top staff. You can attach to the bottom staff and flip it above, but if you do that, you'd better do it consistently. Because if you have some dynamics that are on, first of all, in piano music, in MuseScore, dynamics will affect both staves. But if you also have like hairpins, crescendos and things, diminuendo, crescendo, and diminuendo, it'll try to line up the dynamic marking and the hairpin, and it will take that dynamic marking as the start dynamic for the hairpin and an end dynamic as the end dynamic, but only if they're in the same staff. So for piano music, you want to be in the habit of entering your dynamic markings consistently, all in the same staff, except in those special places where you need to to enter it into the opposite staff. So I'm going to enter my dynamics into the top staff here. That's the normal place to enter them. So I'm going to reopen my palettes, F9. I had closed them just to have a little more working room here. But I'm going to reopen this and put in dynamics. And I'll enter forte. And so there's my forte. And now let's take another look at the this dude here and see what we're looking at. There's some slurs, right? And people were commenting about the inconsistency in the slur, right? In the first system, the slur goes to the end of the first measure and then the end of the second measure and then starts with that end of the second measure and continues. But when the same line or a very similar line happens in the next system, the A here at the end of the measure is not included in that slur. Now, that's just silly. That makes no sense at all. It's not the way it was in the original, because the original had that as a repeated thing. I think the editor messed up. Whether it was Clara that messed up as the editor or the actual person handling the movable type setting the engraving plates, because that was an engraver. That's not the editor. So I don't know who messed that up, but that's just a mistake. So I'm not going to reproduce that mistake. My goal is not to reproduce mistakes. My goal is to produce, what I think of as reasonably correct music. So the slur should go from the beginning of one measure to the end of the next, beginning to the end. So this is including the pickup. So this one, Robert did show it starting from the pickup. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to select, and I'm doing this by clicking, shift-click there, and then type S. Click here, the B flat, shift-click there, press S. Click the A, shift-click the C, press S. Now I've got my slurs. Right? So I now have that done. And I did see a question from Peter, so let me get that back real quick. Dynamic apply to both staves. Yes, for MuseScore knows by default for piano, for anytime there's a grand staff, dynamics by default will apply to both staves. You can override that in the inspector. There's a setting to say, and I would use that. I would use that setting in a minute to say, because if you would use that setting normally if you want different dynamics between the hands, which is not normally a thing. Pianists know, like in this score here, I would know that forte really applies to the left hand because it's the melody, and the right hand would be a little quieter. I would just know that as a pianist. I wouldn't need to be told to play the right hand softer. So the end of the slur fading out, if you mean just like the ink kind of dried up or something, that's if you mean this one, I don't even know which slur you mean, but there's all sorts of this is a scan of a print that's 100 years old probably. It's don't be worrying about details like that in there. Now, my question now is, am I done with this measure, with this system? Because I haven't been studying this. I kind of think that I have everything, but let me just do another quick comparison here to see if I notice anything else that I'm missing. Does it look like I have everything? There's the overlapping thing. So I don't have the pickup at the end, right? The next med, but there's no other articulations, nothing else going on, right? Um, so I'm going to enter that pickup, and then it's going to be basically a copy. It's going to be a copy paste job, right? The next four measures are identical. Totally identical? Are they different at all? Again, you guys have done this already. The only difference was that slur. I say that's just a. In fact, I was saying people were saying it's inconsistent. Maybe it's just the case that this is a scan uh, error, right? Where oh my god, no, it could just be that someone spilled coffee on it and then tried to clean it up. So yeah, this slur should continue. So this is literally identical, other than the final note here, because it's a quarter note in the right hand. Here it's an eighth note, and then I pick up into the next measure. So, great. I select those measures, and now I'm going to use R. R is like copy this thing, go to the next place, paste it, but R is a great shortcut for that. So, wait a minute. It didn't get my dynamic. Oh, sure, because it was I didn't copy my I didn't start from the pickup, and so therefore it also missed the slur. So I get to add that slur, and I certainly don't like how that slur just showed up. So I'm gonna have to fix that. Um, so this all seems good. Let me fix those last couple notes here. This is going to be an eighth note, and then there's a C. So now we look at the beaming here. And well, I'll come back to the slur. The beaming here was one of the very first things I noticed, and Rod mentioned this also. So yeah, Colleen, if you want to use the repeats, go ahead. But I don't think it buys you much. I mean, if you're producing a whole book of them and the repeats allows you to fit multiple pieces on a same page and get away with fewer pages, I guess. But this piece is going to fit easily on a single page without the repeats. So I like it much better without. So I think Clara had the right idea here. So the first thing I noticed when I looked at this was this beaming and how kind of odd it looks to have and of one beamed into two like that. It's not wrong. It just looks a little bit odd because usually we would see if you see two eighth notes beamed, they're two notes that form a whole beat. But there's not like a specific rule against this. Um, it's fine to do that. The only thing it's also fine to do what I have here, which is an eighth rest followed by three notes beamed together. But that's not how. Is that? Let's look at the manuscript. Yeah, he's got flags on all of those, and uh, you know that's kind of an odd choice. So this is a really odd choice to have flagged each of those eighth notes. Why do I say that's an odd choice? Well, I say that because it just is to have three flagged eighth notes in a row. I guess here's the thinking. If she had beamed these two together and then had the last one be all by itself, that would look odd. And I think she didn't want to beam all three of them together, thinking that would look odd. I think personally, I'm actually fine with this. I'm actually totally fine with that. All three of them beamed together. As an editor, I'm fine with that. So if I'm the person making the editorial decisions, that's how I would do it. I would just leave it that way. However, I'm instead going to bring back my palette, go back to the Beam Properties palette, and select all three of those notes. Well, if I could just select the C and hit the flag, the no beam option, and you can see that this is consistent. I've got the and of three beamed into four, just like it is everywhere else. but everywhere else it was followed by a rest. And here it's followed by a note, and somehow this seems a little bit weirder. So I'm just going to select all three of them and go ahead and make them no beam the way Clara did it, because I can't. Yeah, that's just a decision you get to make in how you do it. But that's my choice here. I'm just gonna copy that. So I have all those things now that are beamed the way she has it. The other thing I was going to comment though is the distinction between bum 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 bum. Right, this is a little different because the note on 2 and the note on 4 is a quarter note as opposed to an eighth note, and therefore it's longer. But realistically, they could have notated these as quarter notes and then put a staccato dot on them and called it good. That to me is the clearer way to write the rhythm. It conveys the same thing. If I was the editor on this, I wouldn't have made that change, but I might have contacted Robert and say, "Hey, Bobby boy, what would you think about me making this change, just changing those eighth notes into quarter note staccato? I think it's going to make it easier to read. What do you think?" That would have been something I would have considered as an editor. All right, so the slur here is, as you can see, underneath. And this is proper. When I think about it, this is actually proper notation because, well, it could go either way. But these stems are all down stems. And if the stems are all down, the slur can go below. The thing is that there was an upstem note on a different system. And therefore, that's what made the decision. So anyhow, this would be reasonable to do, but I'm just going to go ahead and press X to flip it above to be consistent again with the actual original edition that we're working from. So, yeah, we're almost done here. I got to do these next 4 bars. But then there's going to be another copy paste job, right? Yeah, it's a little more than that, but it's pretty much. So the next 4 bars are where I get to have the multiple voices. So let me go ahead and do that. So there's a double bar at the end of the section where we just were working. So I'll select here, go to my bar lines palette, and add my double bar. And Heis was asking about that. Why a double bar? And yeah, in larger works, we wouldn't be marking the ends of 8-bar phrases with double bars. They would get too cluttered. So if you've got a piece that's hundreds of measures long, you don't do that. But if you have a piece that's like 20 bars long, 40 bars long, whatever, 64 bars long. Yeah, these double bars every 8 bars really do, or whatever your phrase length is, really do kind of help the viewer, help the player parse what's going on. So I definitely recommend that. The original version, of course, had the repeats, and so it was a little different. So Clara had to be making her own decisions about things like bar lines. All right, let's look at what happens next. So I guess boop ba doo dum, boop ba da 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 dum. Let me enter that. Boop ba da dum, boop ba da da dum dum. Was that a dotted quarter? Shift W will turn a quarter into a dotted quarter. And then, so that gives me that in voice 1. And, yeah. Let me enter voice 2. Rest. Blum, blum. So voice 2, I'll go back to note entry mode. Control Alt 2 is a shortcut for voice 2. 4, 0 for the rest. And then C down here. E, press R. And then another rest. And now B flat and C. For rest, B flat, C. R. And now rest, C, C, B. Flips 4. C, C. Not B flat, but B. And rest, C, C. Rest, C, C. Yeah. Okay. And that completes that. For the left hand, I could try to get clever and have copied the right hand, because if you notice, the left hand's the same as the right hand was, but a down an octave and a third. So I could have actually copied and pasted and shifted, but realistically, that's especially now that I've entered the second voice, that's going to be more trouble than it's worth. Um, Although, because I can show it, I'm going to. I'm going to select this. I'm going to use the selection filter to say, hey, let's exclude voice 2 from the selection. So only voice 1 is selected. Copy. Come down here, Control V to paste, down an octave, and now diatonically down a third. Shift Alt down. So I could have done that after getting in the articulations and everything, but there you go. Now I need to reselect voice 2 so that my future copy and paste will get it. So there's an accent, a funny looking big accent. That's nice, Colleen, to be missing Peter for me, but yeah, this is definitely interesting. Um, I can enter the accents on both of these together. I just control click them, shift V for the accent, and then same for the first beat. In fact, I can just do the range selection because it knows to skip the rest. So I click this note and then shift down, and then dun 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 is staccato. And here I'll have to kind of control click them to avoid voice 2. Shift S. Here I can range select, Shift S. And now there's another curious thing that people are asking about, the slur and the staccato together, which is a thing, but only barely. It's a thing, but I don't know that you'd get anyone to agree what it really means. If I press S right now, it's going to add a slur on both voices. So instead of making the range selection, something else you can do is just select the first and last note with control click and then add the slur that way. Oh, that's probably not correct. Um, that note is a C, right? This everywhere else it was in tenths, but here it's in an octave. So push it back up and then shift click the last note of the last note. Okay, now this is unconscionable. The right hand slur ends on the last eighth note. The left hand slur goes all the way to the dotted quarter. Really? Let's look at Bobby. No, it goes all the way to the dotted quarter. The slur goes all the way to the dotted quarter. That is just wrong in the original. So I will click this and then shift right is what extends that thing. And now click, shift click, press S to add my slur. And what's the best way to learn? Yeah, you do them. So the thing is, if you think about the shortcuts that I've used the duration shortcuts a million times. I've used the letter names to enter the notes a million times. What other shortcuts have I used, though? I've used Control Z for undo. That's the same in every program you've ever used. So in theory, you would have known Control Z before you ever heard of MuseScore. That might not literally be true, but Control Z is one that should be pretty well ingrained in the head. Same with Control C to copy, Control V to paste. What other shortcuts have I added? Shift S and Shift V for staccato and accent. And, for staccato, V because it kind of looks like an accent, I guess. S for slur. So S for slur, Shift S for staccato. And I used X for flip. And yeah, I use that a lot too. So those are the most common ones that I use. Yeah, there's all sorts of other more obscure ones, but I'm going to use those a lot. And so yeah, the more you use them, the more you'll learn them. So maybe try to see which command you see yourself having to not use a shortcut for, which commands you find yourself having to click for, and which ones you find yourself having to do the most often, and then learn the shortcut for it. So yeah, this is starting to look good here. So the slur really starts in the original with the eighth note. And is that how Clara has it too. Yeah, so she's kind of cheating the slur, and I think for good reason. So notice what's happening here. This slur doesn't go all the way to the C, but it clearly starts before the first note of the measure, right? It's starting there. And I think it's to avoid the slur looking. Okay, so in Robert's version, this slur is pretty flat and it's kind of touching that note stem. He's also cheated that note stem. As we learned in the music engraving thing, that note stem should have gone all the way up to a ledger line above. And so he's cheated the length of that note stem there, made it too short, and he's made that slur pretty flat. And Clara cheated it by not having the slur go all the way to reach the middle C. MuseScore doesn't do either of those cheats. It does what you ask it to do, and frankly looks not so hot, right? Because it's attempting to avoid the that accent. So let's see if we can improve this some. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try pulling this accent down. So all I did is I'm using control. So up arrow and down arrow will move symbols, a little bit at a time. Control up and control down move it a whole staff space at a time. Control R resets it. So I like moving things in kind of precise increments. So I'm going to try half a staff space, which is 5. Each down arrow will move it 1/10 of a staff space. So 5 clicks of the down arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gives it half a staff space. And you can see that already allowed the slur to flatten a little bit. I might also take the slur and take this endpoint and move it up. I'm going to again reset that thing and just use control up. And now I have something a little more palatable to me. So I brought the accent in a little bit and pushed the beginning of the slur up a little bit. And I feel like that's good enough for now. Could I improve on that more? Yes, but I'm not going to obsess about it at the moment. So what about the left-hand slur? The left-hand slur is the same basic thing. So close my selection filter. I'm not going to be needing that. There's also a slur, and close my palettes. Don't need that anymore. And when it added, oops, I meant to click and then so every time I say oops, it's immediately followed my typing Control Z, right? Click that C, Control click that G, type S to add the slur, and then I look at it, it's below the staff, I don't want it below the staff, X to flip it above. And then I look at this and say, gee, that looks pretty terrible too. Can I use the same trick here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did that do it enough? I don't know. It's consistent with the other one. I'm going to leave it alone for the moment. And then do the left hand. Click and shift click. Press S. And then click, shift click, press S. And again, flip over to the original edition. Whoops, original edition over here. The slurs are above the staff in all cases. So X. And here, again, I'm just copying her edition and not worrying about whether it might have made more sense to put that slur below. And see what's happened is this slur is forcing more space between the staves. When it was below, it was able to close in the space between the staves a little bit. As soon as I flip this above, it added extra space. And you can tell it added extra space because look at this. Let me flip it below again. You can see that this slur was able to slot in there really nicely. But when I flip this slur up, it needed extra space. And you can tell there's extra space because here it is also. So I'm not hugely a fan of that slur being above. But if you notice, she's got all that extra space there too. And so I'm not going to sweat it. I'm not going to sweat the extra space. Now this, but look what she's done. She's flipped the accent below the staff. That allowed this to not be so curved. So, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So this is the MuseScore Café. I'm going to be more concerned with how to do things than whether I should do them. We could ask whether that was a wise choice or not, because normally the accents are on the note head side, except when there's multiple voices involved. Here, there's multiple voices involved. That's why this accent goes on the outside. Here, that wasn't really called for. But on the other hand, it's sort of consistent. It sort of mirrors the other one. So there's a rationale for it. Did she do the same thing here? Curiously, she didn't do the same thing there. Is shortening the stems an option? Yes, absolutely. And MuseScore does shorten stems by default. This is already shortened a little bit from what it should be, right? This is not a full octave long stem, although it actually looks like it is. But this one you can tell, well, it's because of the beaming, actually. The beaming, it defeats that. So actually, that's a pretty good idea. Look how short she's made those stems. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click this beam here and just use the up arrow and shorten it some. That's like 5 clicks. That might be too short. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking, as I'm getting it longer, MuseScore is pushing the staves further apart. I'm going to go right to where it doesn't, right to where it doesn't. So again, I'm using the arrow keys because it's nice and precise as opposed to dragging. I like that. So, and by the way, the algorithm for this is different in MuseScore 4. It might possibly be improved. And so, Dave, as far as pulling the middles of the slurs down, yeah, for some of these super curvy ones like this, that is a reasonable thing to do. It can be a little awkward because there are like mathematical rules about how curved slurs should be. And as soon as you start messing with that, they can look weird. But often it's better than alternatives, right? So let's take a look at her measure 9 again. So her measure 9 isn't as curved because the endpoint starts up higher and further to the left. So like hers starts directly over the flat sign and is a little higher. Let me make that change. Right? So that change already looks maybe better. I don't know. This start point though, I don't know. Let me reset that slur, put it above again. I'm not as comfortable with moving it to the left, but moving it up helps. Moving it up has the side effect of pulling the middle down. And I think that's the wiser choice because really the problem was how low it is. Anytime the slur starts as low as this, it's going to be a real steep angle at the beginning to try to clear that accent mark. So what you want to do is bring the start point of the slur high enough that it doesn't need to be a steep angle to clear the accent. So I don't know. To me, that's probably the wisest way to go about it. But it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. I could do the same thing here, click this, move it up another notch. And now, is this too far from that stem? Yeah, if this was a wind part, if this was for a wind instrument, my timer just went off telling me I've not been moving for an hour. If this was a wind part or a string part where the slur really means something, I would be nervous about starting the slur so far from the note because, yeah, that tells you things about tonguing that you don't want to miss. For a pianist, slurs are like, they don't mean anything really. I mean, they mean something at a pretty esoteric level of, oh, treat these notes like they're a phrase, play them smoothly in some unspecified manner. But it doesn't mean the really clear, obvious thing it means to a wind player, tongue versus don't tongue, right? That's like a huge other difference in winds and in strings. It's change bow or do it on the same bow. For pianists, it doesn't mean anything so specific. So let me save. So yeah, I may be okay with the slur being this far, and obviously she was too. I mean, her slur is ridiculously far from the note. This to me is pushing it. That I don't think I would have wanted to live with that. I don't think I would have wanted to live with that. So yeah, I've been going for an hour, and I'm so close to being done that I'm just going to keep going for these last couple of measures here It's the same melody again, right? But now it's boom, dum, da, da, boom, da, 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 bum, bum, bum. Just because I wanted to be able to get this in and show the dynamic above. So I'm going to enter that dynamic here. Let's bring the palette back and dynamics and enter that F and then flip it above. Right? And voice 2 has in it dun, dun, rest. Oops, I didn't go to voice 2. Undo, undo. Voice 2 for rest, R, rest, and then F and A. Rest, F, up here, and A. And then bump, 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 bump. Now, did I make a mistake, or did that rhythm happen elsewhere? Bump, bump. No, this is like a new little rhythm that we haven't seen yet. Bump, 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 bump. Which is kind of cool. That little bit of change. So rest, bump, rest, bump, rest, bump, bump. And the left hand is just that melody. You've already seen how I copied and pasted with the selection filter, but it's less time than just entering the dang thing. Okay, so at this point, notice that now MuseScore was not quite able to fit all of that on one line. I was a little afraid of that it didn't totally fit. And you all have probably already figured out that that happened also, unless your settings are a little different, and so they were. So I need to make them fit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do format, style, measure, and just decrease the spacing. Since I've already added line breaks, I can make this all the way down to the minimum, 1. And now it's going to fit as much as it can, but my line breaks will prevent it from doing more than 4 measures. So I could try to make the staff size smaller if I thought that this was going to look too crowded at this staff size. But again, I can worry about that kind of stuff later. And I think I now have that basically done. I need to add those little slurs. Boo-dum, doo-dum, then boo-da-da-da-dum. So from C to F. And by the way, you can enter slurs while you're entering the notes if you have the foresight to do it. I never do. Not saying it's good, but I just rarely do. Boo-dum, boo-dum, doo-da-da-da-da-dum. And there's those slurs. And all the slurs are above, including this one here. So I'll go ahead and flip that one there just to be consistent. But I wouldn't, I probably would have picked MuseScore's default because it's fine the way it was originally too. So, yeah, everything else that is now more of the same, but with more copy and paste. So you've basically seen me enter the whole thing in a little bit of copy and pasting. I will be done with the score, and you don't need to see me do that. And so I'm going to call it good here. So hopefully you found something useful in here about my process for doing stuff. By the way, I have everyone else's scores loaded up here. People did a fabulous job. I'm going to look at everyone's versions in here, and I see lots of good stuff. There's Michael's, here's Peter's. Peter, yeah, we talked about the font issue there, why that didn't work so well, picking a different font. I don't have your font. I see that this one here, Michael Gold's version, you didn't figure out how to make an eighth note pickup. You have a quarter note pickup, and you made the first eighth note invisible. Yeah, so I'll do a whole video where I kind of critique people's stuff individually and post that in the Engraving Workshop. But I wanted you all here to see my process. But yeah, people have basically done a really nice job with this. And, it was not super simple. It involved a lot of things, a lot of thinking. But, not like ridiculously complicated things either. So I think it made a good sort of let's see where we're at exercise here. All right, so let me bring up my. For whatever reason, doesn't want to show me. Oh, it's Control F10. I forget which shortcut I'm using for the play panel because I want to play out my theme music. Where's my theme music? Here we go. So, thanks everyone for being here, and this has been Marc Sabatella with the MuseScore Café, and yeah, we had fun looking at The Happy Farmer, Fröhlicher, Landmann. And yeah, come back and join us in the music engraving workshop where we're all working on this score, trying to improve our skills, not just entering it in MuseScore, but making some of these editorial decisions. And so we're giving each other feedback on that, what the decisions are, and it's a great resource, so by all means check it out if you haven't already, and it's available as part of the gold level membership. So this has been the session. Tomorrow will be the music masterclass, and we'll talk more about ear training things. And don't be surprised if the Happy Farmer doesn't make a reappearance there, because I'm going to be singing some stuff from it, and maybe we'll bring some people on also to try their hands at some singing stuff, since that's something we can do now, right? So yeah, this schedule is going to continue. I'm going to continue doing cafes on Wednesdays, music masterclass on Thursdays, but we'll be able to tie them in to the new workshops. So I'm talking and stalling until the music's done, and then give it a couple extra seconds before I press the stop button to make sure it doesn't cut me off midstream. And thanks everyone for being here, and see you all next time.